Let me say this gently because this situation is not funny, it's heartbreaking. When you reach a certain age in life, especially for those of us who have lived long enough to see families rise, fall, and repeat the same painful cycles, you begin to recognize warning signs. You don't need gossip. You don't need headlines. You just know when something is going terribly wrong. And that's exactly what this feels like. What we're witnessing right now is not just a young man speaking out. It's a son carrying a burden far heavier than he understands. A son stepping into a public arena that is unforgiving, permanent, and ruthless, without realizing that every word spoken today echoes for a lifetime. Christian Combs didn't just respond to a public figure. He stepped into a storm that was already raging, and instead of sheltering himself, he walked straight into the wind with his chest out, believing loyalty alone would protect him. For those of us over 65, this feels familiar. Many of us have seen sons defend fathers who didn't need defending. We've seen children mistake loyalty for wisdom. We've watched families close ranks, not realizing that silence, not noise, is often the strongest shield. Here's the painful truth. Sometimes defending the people we love publicly does more harm than walking away quietly. This situation escalated when Christian responded to online commentary in a way that felt impulsive, emotional, and uncalculated. To younger audiences, it may look like bravado. To older eyes, it looks like fear of losing identity, fear of being irrelevant, fear of standing alone without the shadow that once gave him purpose. There is a difference between confidence and desperation, and that difference becomes obvious with time. Now let's slow this down. Christian is not being treated as an equal in this situation. He is not being viewed as a contemporary. He is being seen, fairly or unfairly, as a young man speaking out of turn in a space dominated by seasoned players who understand timing, restraint, and consequence. Older generations understand this instinctively. You don't challenge elders publicly unless you are prepared for lifelong consequences. And you certainly don't do it while legal matters involving your family are still unresolved. That's where this becomes dangerous. Every word spoken publicly can be interpreted, misinterpreted, replayed, archived, and examined. Not just by the public, but by people whose job it is to connect dots others overlook. This is not about jokes. This is not about social media clout. This is about timing, and the timing couldn't be worse. What makes this especially troubling is the emotional position Christian is standing in. He is defending legacy before establishing his own. He is fighting battles that are not his to fight. And in doing so, he is inviting scrutiny into areas of his life that might otherwise remain untouched. For seniors watching this unfold, there's a deep sadness here. Because we recognize the look of a young man trying to prove his worth, not to the world, but to a parent who once dominated every room they entered. Many of us grew up in households where fathers were larger than life. Their approval meant everything. Their disappointment cut deeper than any outside criticism. And when those fathers fell, their children often felt obligated to carry the weight of redemption. But here's the truth that only age teaches you. You cannot rescue someone from consequences they created themselves. And trying to do so may cost you your own future. Christian's public comments didn't land as strength. They landed as provocation. They opened doors that were previously closed. They raised questions that didn't need to be asked. And worst of all, they shifted focus away from personal growth and toward confrontation. For a man his age, the smarter move would have been silence. Focus. Building something separate. Something clean. Something untouched by controversy. Because legacy is not inherited, it's earned. There's also a generational lesson here that many seniors will immediately recognize. In past decades, families handled matters privately. Pride was preserved through discretion. Problems were addressed behind closed doors, not broadcast for the world to dissect. Today's culture encourages reaction instead of reflection. But wisdom still whispers the same advice it always has: say less. Move smarter. What concerns many observers, especially those with legal knowledge, is not what was said but what was implied. Words can be interpreted in ways the speaker never intended. References can be misunderstood. And when names, families, and personal relationships are mentioned casually, they can invite attention from people who ask uncomfortable questions. That's when things spiral. And here's where the emotional weight truly lands. Christian may believe he is protecting his father, but from the outside, it appears he may be exposing him further. For seniors who have raised children, this strikes a nerve, because no parent wants to see their child sacrifice their own future out of misplaced loyalty. No mother or father wants to watch their child step into fire for a battle already lost. There is still time to step back. There is still time to choose a quieter path. But once words are released publicly, they can never be taken back. This is no longer about entertainment. It's about judgment, restraint, and survival. And as this story continues, one question lingers heavily in the air. As we move deeper into this situation, it becomes clearer why so many people, especially those who have lived long enough to recognize patterns, are uneasy. This isn't just about a public disagreement. It's about judgment, timing, and a young man stepping into a role he is not prepared to carry. For those over 65, there's a saying many of us grew up with. Everything doesn't require a response. That wisdom wasn't just about manners. It was about survival. Christian's decision to speak publicly didn't come across as confident. It came across as reactive. And reaction, especially in emotionally charged situations, often leads people straight into traps they didn't even see coming. What makes this moment particularly concerning is that the response wasn't measured. It wasn't strategic. It wasn't thoughtful. It was emotional, and emotion, when mixed with pride and legacy, is one of the most dangerous combinations there is. Older generations understand something younger people often haven't learned yet. You don't win every battle by fighting. Sometimes you win by refusing to engage at all. The individual Christian responded to has been in the public eye for decades. He understands attention, provocation, and timing. He knows how to let others defeat themselves simply by speaking too much. That kind of experience doesn't come from fame. It comes from longevity. Christian, on the other hand, appears to be operating from a place of urgency. Almost as if silence feels like surrender. Almost as if he believes that defending his father publicly proves loyalty, strength, or maturity. But here's the hard truth many seniors recognize immediately. Loyalty does not require self-destruction. There's also something deeply troubling about how personal references were used. When family, relationships, and private matters are mentioned casually, they stop being private. They become public property. And once that door opens, you can't control who walks through it, or what questions they bring with them. People who have lived through decades of media cycles understand this all too well. Once scrutiny begins, it rarely stays contained. It spreads. It widens. It connects dots that may have otherwise remained separate. That's why discretion has always been a form of power. Another layer to this story that resonates strongly with older audiences is the struggle of children growing up under towering figures. Many of us know what it feels like to live in someone else's shadow, especially a parent who dominated the room, the industry, or the family narrative. In those situations, children often feel invisible unless they mirror the parent's behavior, defend their reputation, or carry their banner forward. But imitation is not independence. Christian's comments didn't establish him as his own man. They tied him even more tightly to a narrative that many people are already exhausted by. Instead of separating himself and building something clean, he stepped further into controversy, placing his own future at risk. And that's where concern turns into alarm. Because while online arguments fade, records do not. Screenshots do not. Statements do not. And when matters are already under serious review, additional noise can complicate things in ways most people don't fully understand. Older Americans remember a time when legal matters were handled quietly, through attorneys, not microphones. When families were advised to keep their heads down, protect their children, and say nothing that could be twisted later. That wisdom hasn't changed. Only the platform has. What also stands out, and deeply troubles many observers, is the absence of guidance. Where are the advisors? Where are the elders in this young man's life telling him to pause, breathe, and step back? Because this doesn't look like strategy. It looks like someone left unsupervised in a situation far bigger than them. And here's something seniors understand in their bones. When powerful people stop listening to counsel, that's when things unravel. There's also a human element here that deserves compassion. Christian is not just a public figure. He's a son, and sons often feel responsible for carrying the emotional weight of their fathers, especially when those fathers can no longer control the narrative themselves. But children are not meant to fight their parents' battles. They are meant to build lives of their own. Every generation learns this lesson the hard way. Instead of focusing on growth, creativity, or personal direction, Christian has become reactive, responding to outside voices rather than cultivating his own. And that's a dangerous place to live, especially when public opinion is already leaning heavily in one direction. To many older viewers, this feels like watching someone touch a hot stove repeatedly, insisting it won't burn them this time. And sadly, it always does. The most unsettling part of all is that this situation could have been avoided entirely. Silence would have been interpreted as maturity. Focus would have been seen as strength. Distance would have signaled wisdom. Instead, the response has invited more commentary, more ridicule, and more scrutiny. Not just for Christian, but for everyone connected to him. And here's the sobering reality seniors recognize. When the spotlight turns harsh, it rarely shines on just one person. Families get pulled in. Histories get re-examined. Old stories resurface. And the cost becomes far greater than anyone anticipated. This is why elders always caution the young. Think long-term. Not emotional. Not immediate. Long-term. Christian still has time to change course. To step back. To focus inward rather than outward. But every public statement makes that path narrower. As this continues to unfold, the question becomes unavoidable. Is this young man being protected or being used? Because sometimes the loudest defenders are the most exposed. By the time you reach your later years in life, you've seen enough stories unfold to recognize when someone is repeating history instead of learning from it. You've watched families rise on talent and fall on ego. You've seen children inherit privilege, but also inherit pressure. The kind that quietly ruins lives if it isn't handled with care. That's why this situation feels so heavy. Christian Combs is not simply responding to criticism. He appears to be wrestling with something much deeper. The expectation to protect a legacy that may already be beyond saving. And for anyone who has lived long enough to understand what legacy really means, this is where concern turns into heartbreak. Legacy is not a shield. It's not armor. And it certainly isn't something you can defend with words alone. For seniors watching this unfold, it feels painfully familiar. Many of us grew up during a time when family names carried weight, but they also carried consequences. When a name was damaged, it didn't just affect one person. It affected everyone attached to it, especially the children. And that's the trap Christian seems to be walking into. Instead of being allowed the space to define himself, he is being pulled deeper into a narrative that does not belong to him. Every public comment ties his identity tighter to someone else's mistakes. Every reaction reinforces the idea that he cannot exist independently. That's not strength. That's entanglement. Older generations understand something younger ones are still learning. You cannot repair the past by reliving it louder. Another troubling layer is the way respect, or lack of it, has entered the conversation. Age has always mattered in American culture, particularly among those who came of age before social media erased boundaries. Elders were addressed carefully. Conflicts were handled privately. Disagreements didn't require public humiliation. So when age becomes a point of mockery, it lands differently with seniors. Because age is not weakness, it's experience. It's survival. It's proof that someone has lived through storms others haven't even seen yet. What Christian seems not to realize is that attacking someone's age doesn't elevate him. It diminishes him. It signals insecurity, not confidence. For those over 65, this is especially painful to watch because many of us remember being young and thinking we knew everything, only to later realize how little we understood about restraint, consequence, and reputation. Reputation, once damaged, is extraordinarily difficult to rebuild. What also stands out is the absence of personal direction. Christian is not being seen as an artist, a creator, or an independent thinker. He is being viewed primarily as an extension, an echo, of someone else. And echoes fade. This is where seasoned observers begin to worry that he is being positioned, intentionally or not, as a distraction. When attention shifts from legal realities to public arguments, it muddies the waters. It creates noise. And noise benefits no one except those hoping to confuse the narrative. Seniors recognize this tactic instantly. Many lived through eras when families closed ranks during crises, pushing younger members forward to soften public perception. But that strategy often came at a cost. The younger ones paid the price long after the headlines moved on. That's why so many people are uneasy, because it looks less like guidance and more like exposure. Another deeply concerning aspect is the casual way personal relationships are referenced. For older Americans, this crosses a line. Families were taught to protect private matters fiercely. Not because they were hiding something, but because dignity mattered. Once private lives become talking points, dignity is the first thing lost. And when dignity is lost, judgment follows. Christian may believe he's speaking boldly, but to experienced eyes, it feels reckless. Words are being used without consideration for how they might be interpreted, or by whom. People who have lived through decades of public scandals understand this truth. It's not always what you say, it's how others can use what you said. That's where danger lives. There's also a generational disconnect happening here. Younger generations often equate attention with relevance. Older generations know that attention can be a trap. Not all visibility is good. Sometimes being unseen is the safest place to be. Christian's actions suggest he is chasing validation in the wrong arena. Instead of building quietly, he is reacting loudly. Instead of distancing himself from controversy, he is inserting himself into it. And for seniors watching, it feels like watching someone gamble with their future without understanding the stakes. Another painful truth emerges here. No child should feel responsible for repairing a parent's image. That burden is too heavy. It distorts judgment. It pressures loyalty over wisdom. And it often ends with the child paying a price the parent never intended. This is why elders often urge younger people to live their own lives fully, even when family dynamics are complicated. You are not disloyal for choosing peace. You are not weak for choosing silence. In fact, silence is often the strongest move. Christian still has time to step away from this narrative, to stop responding, to focus on who he wants to be, not who others expect him to defend. But time narrows with every public statement. And once a pattern is established, it becomes harder to break. As seniors know well, life has a way of teaching lessons whether we're ready or not. Some lessons come gently. Others arrive through loss, regret, or public embarrassment. The hope for those watching with compassion is that Christian learns before the lesson becomes permanent. Because legacies can be rebuilt, but only if you stop trying to carry someone else's. By the time you reach the later chapters of life, you learn a truth that cannot be rushed. Not every fight is yours to finish. That lesson sits at the heart of this entire situation. What we are witnessing is not simply a public disagreement. It is a moment where a young man stands at a crossroads, whether he realizes it or not. One path leads toward continued noise, reaction, and emotional defense. The other leads toward silence, reflection, and the slow, difficult work of building something separate and sustainable. For seniors watching this unfold, the choice seems clear. But wisdom often comes after experience, not before it. Christian Combs appears to be caught between loyalty and self-preservation. And while loyalty is admirable, it becomes destructive when it costs you your own future. Many older Americans know this lesson personally. We've watched friends, relatives, and even ourselves make sacrifices in the name of family, only to realize later that no one asked us to give up our peace. There's a quiet dignity in knowing when to step back. The hardest part of growing up, no matter your age, is accepting that you cannot fix everything. You cannot protect everyone, and you certainly cannot rewrite the past by defending it louder. This situation has drawn attention not because of talent or achievement, but because of conflict. And conflict is a poor foundation for any lasting legacy. Seniors understand this better than anyone. You don't want to be remembered for arguments. You want to be remembered for character. What makes this moment so fragile is that it invites further scrutiny. Every public response creates new questions. Every emotional reaction adds layers that didn't need to exist. And once scrutiny begins, it rarely stops on its own. Older generations know this cycle well. They've seen it play out across industries, families, and communities. First comes the controversy. Then comes the reaction. Then comes the investigation, not always formal, but thorough and relentless. This is why elders preach caution. Another painful truth must be acknowledged. There is a difference between being brave and being used. Sometimes those closest to us encourage action not because it's wise, but because it serves their own needs. And when that happens, the person taking the risk is often the one with the least protection. Christian deserves better than that. He deserves advisors who prioritize his future, not his usefulness as a shield. He deserves the space to grow without being pulled into battles that are not his to fight. For seniors, this evokes a familiar sadness. The sadness of watching youth burn itself trying to keep others warm. There is also the matter of public sympathy. Sympathy is fragile. It's extended when people see restraint, humility, and growth. It evaporates when they see arrogance, repetition, and defensiveness. Right now, Christian stands at a point where sympathy could still exist, but only if he chooses a different approach. Silence would not be weakness here. Silence would be wisdom. Another lesson older Americans understand deeply is this. When the room is loud, the smartest person is often the quietest. Stepping away does not mean surrender. It means choosing longevity over reaction. It means protecting your name while there is still something left to protect. And perhaps most importantly, it means honoring the parent you care about in the one way that actually helps, by not making things worse. As this chapter unfolds, many are beginning to see the absence of professional guidance. The steady hands that once managed crises appear missing. And when leadership disappears, mistakes multiply. This is not the time for improvisation. This is not the time for emotion-driven decisions. This is the time for restraint. Seniors watching this story may feel frustrated, even helpless, because they know how this ends if nothing changes. They've seen it before. The young person keeps talking. The situation escalates. Opportunities close quietly while attention grows loudly. Then one day the noise fades, and what's left is regret. But it doesn't have to end that way. Christian still has an opportunity to pause, to redirect, to choose a quieter, wiser path forward, to let the dust settle rather than stirring it further. The public will move on. It always does. What remains is the life you build when the cameras turn away. For older Americans, this is the core message. Choose peace while it's still available. Because pride fades, noise fades, but consequences linger. If Christian steps back now, history may remember this as a moment of growth rather than collapse. But if he continues down the current path, the story may be written for him, and not in his favor. In the end, the greatest act of loyalty may not be defense at all. It may be knowing when to stop speaking and start living.